Brilliant. Okay, so thank you for the invite. I've given this talk a couple of times before. All I'm going to do here is I'm going to take you through the geology data sets that you can access through Digimap. And I'll also talk a little bit about what's happening to those data sets, where we're going in the future with them, a little bit about BGS, a little bit about how we use these data sets and how we know other people use these data sets. And then I'm looking forward to seeing how it all works in your own system. So without further ado, let's move on. So I don't know if you know much about the British Geological Survey. We've been going since 1835. We've kind of like grown and then shrunk over the years. So we're down at 601 staff at the moment, but we're spread across all four nations, and we've got something like, I think we've got something like 25 buildings, but most of those are labs. And then we've got our main centres are in Keyworth. We've got a centre in Edinburgh, a centre in Belfast, and an office in Cardiff. You can find other little offices dotted around the country as well, which relate to some of our facilities, including the Natural History Museum, which is always worth a look. We tend to focus, about 50% of our time is paid for research, which is funded by UKRI, and the remaining time is what we call commissioned research, which is funded by organisations who need us to solve problems with geology data. We also have, well, at one point we had up to 200 PhDs running. We are cutting back on PhDs at this moment in time, so I think we're down to about 60 or 70 now. We have a range of science programs which focus on the main areas of decarbonisation, multi-hazards, and then environmental change and resilience. So they're the three main kind of areas that we try and deal with. Decarbonisation is looking at all aspects of either carbon capture and storage or alternative energy supplies. Multi-hazards covers everything from global earthquakes and volcanic monitoring right through to working out whether people's houses are likely to subside. And then environmental change and resilience covers all kinds of aspects of how groundwater moves through our systems, the nature and types of soils that we have in this country, as well as the nature and types of geological materials. And the national project right down at the bottom of the left-hand side is what used to be the old land survey team. And I'll come back to that in a bit because things are about to change slightly. The way we're structured is we operate within projects, but we act as a matrix. So we can call upon any scientist to assist in any project. And we largely tend to work for UK government, industries. We work collaboratively with universities, and we will try and work with R&D departments with the major scientific sectors and also the major infrastructure sectors. There's an awful lot of R&D going on into power at the moment, for example. And we have a public role, so we're also here to inform and entertain occasionally. Okay, so geology data that exists in Digimap. Oh, this is not a very clear slide, so I do apologise for the colours. We've had a branding in the last couple of years, and I'm not sure we've got the bold and the colours right here. The highest resolution data that we provide is BGS Geology 10K, which is 1 to 10,000 scale geology. There is also a small selection of Geology 25K. These tend to be very field specific, so if you're doing field work on a course, you've probably seen these data sets. The main data set that we support is the BGS Geology 50K, which is our near national coverage. There's one sheet missing in Wales. And then a lot of people will use the Geology 250 and the Geology 625 for general information about what's going on regionally. So you'll see those a lot in diagrams and in reports, basically. And we also do all the geology offshore as well. They're different scales offshore, but you mostly take the 250,000 scale. And there's a little bit more on that later on as well. On the right-hand side are some of their other data sets that you have access to. So there's a soil parent material, superficial deposit, a thickness model, the original 625 scale hydrogeology, and then some interesting ones, geological indicators of flooding and geocoast, and then the onshore boreholes index and lexicons of name drop units and permeability indices. The left-hand side data is what we call baseline data. So these are geology maps that you'll use to inform yourself about geology. The right-hand side tend to be derivatives, apart from the onshore boreholes and the lexicons. They are the right hand on the upper right hand side are what we call derivative products. So we work the geology up into a different answer, whether it's hydrogeology, soil type, or the thickness of the quaternary units. So they're always more entertaining to see where you can take a geology map once you start throwing other bits of data and science at it, basically. Right, so without further ado, let's go straight to the mapping. 10K and 25K geology, these two data sets on the left-hand side are what you currently have. On the right-hand side is what will be coming hopefully shortly after Christmas, which is a blended data set with some additional content. I've been trying to make this data set now for 7 years because we've had to rebuild it from scratch, but it will be coming shortly after Christmas. And we are starting to prep for version 4, which will probably come in about 12 to 18 months' time. Hopefully what we're going to do is we're going to significantly increase the throughput of our 10K data set. We've had a lot of data in analog format for a very, very long time, and we're aiming to have, it won't be complete coverage, we just can't afford to do that, but we're aiming to have a lot more coverage now of 10K data, which is the main working data set for BGS geologists. The 50K data, if you've been using what used to be iGeology and is now BGS Geology Viewer, or if you're using the GeoIndex, or if you're using Digimap in the way we think you're using it, then the 50K data is probably the data set you've accessed most. And I'm not sure whether my little indicator screen works on here. There is a tiny grey square, which is in the middle of Wales. I don't know whether you can see my pointer on there. That sheet is called Knighton, and it is currently being mapped. They're in the last throes of mapping that, and we're hoping to get that sheet prepped and ready and into BGS Geology and then into Digimap, hopefully by 2024. That depends on how the money goes. So that's version 8 on the left-hand side. We are at the moment preparing for version 9 on the right-hand side. We're going to be updating the fault database, so it contains a lot more information. The faults have been completely recaptured and rebuilt, so they make much more sense rather than just being lines on a map. And we're also hoping to add in an unconformity database. So for the geologists in the audience, you'll know that you tend to build up structural domains on the basis of either fault complexes that bound your domains or unconformities that constrain the depositional cycles of your domains. So we're hoping to sort out the faults and the unconformities. Knighton sheet will be finished, and we have compiled corrections for at least 35 sheets. In fact, in the last 10 years, we've changed something like 400 of the 494 sheets that are in our product. We probably need to do a bit more work. And for anyone who is familiar with BGS and how we're operating, the small inset picture showing the LiDAR shows the kind of challenge we face. LiDAR is fantastic, but it also shows everyone where our maps are not quite right. So we're going to have to do something about improving the fit of our maps to LiDAR, and there'll be a bit more of that in the next few slides. BGS Geology 250 is one of my favorite data sets. It's really old now. Now, it doesn't mean that it's particularly out of date. It's just that in terms of its data content and how we make it, it's a little bit past its sell-by date. So we have a team who are doing a full review. We will create a new version of this as soon as we can. It'll have new bedrock content and a new superficial layer, which the 250K has never had before. And it will have a modified fault database as well, a bit like the 50K data. In fact, we'll be using the 50K data set to make this. I can't give you a date on this, but it is a fairly sizable project that we're going to have to do to make this all work. 250K fell out of favor for all kinds of reasons because we had 50K available, but 250K is actually a really great scale to work with if you're doing regional studies. So if you're in a future career, you're doing regional work, this is my go-to layer. If I want to look at parts of Scotland or parts of England or Wales, I don't go straight for the 50K. I go for this one because it gives you the overview really, really quickly. Offshore 250K is also undergoing a fairly substantial change now. So we take on board a lot of multi-beam and side scan data from all kinds of sectors who are operating in our coastal waters and further afield. So we're starting to convert the 250K offshore maps into higher resolution models. There are now at least 3 Bristol Channel, Anglesey and Yorkshire Coast models, which are either online or just about to go online, which are effectively using underwater LiDAR to show you the geology. And they are quite detailed maps, and we will be doing a lot more of those, and they will become a regular feature of offshore data sets going forward. And we've had a lot of inquiries about quaternary thickness, so I'm just about to enter into talks with various organizations to update the quaternary thickness data set in these maps as well. So there's a lot going on in the offshore environment, and that's largely because, I'm sure you're aware, we have a lot of offshore infrastructure now, and it all requires a bit of engineering understanding and a bit of geological understanding to make sure it all works. 625 is where most students kind of like have their first entry point into BGS geology mapping, and certainly quite a lot of geology students will have a copy of this somewhere on their wall, or probably the northern part because it's the more exciting looking map. This again is a little bit old. I think this dates back to 2007 for the bedrock. The superficials are not our finest hour. So if you are using the superficial layer at 65K scale in anger, I'm going to suggest caution. We are going to be changing this data set. I know I've been promising this before, but we do actually now have an improved data set for use at 625. So we'll try and roll that out next year. We're a little bit short-staffed at the moment. We're hoping to take some new staff on. As soon as we can get these things out the door, we will. And as soon as they've left our building, hopefully you'll see them in Digimap, basically. Again, 625K is going to be totally revised using the 50K data set as its source. There'll be a mixture of manual and automatic generalization of features. Superficial is mostly automatically generalized, but it's not bad. It looks pretty good. We've had a few exciting times with the computer algorithm doing some interesting things in some of the more tortuous areas of geology. But we're working on it, and it will improve. And then I'll quickly cover these. So BGS Soils is a project that BGS started back in 1999, and we originally made the data set on the left-hand side for what was supposed to be the Soil Framework Directive back in 2006, just before that got canned. The soil data set is still available. It's currently in version 6.1, and we are working on version 8. There is no version 7, just in case anyone's wondering. The version numbers relate to the version of BGS Geology that they're based on. So 6.1 is your current version. It covers the basic soil texture, depth, and chemistry. We also have erosion models built into it as well, and you can freely access it by the UK Soil Observatory as well as via your Digimap platform, basically. Happy to take questions on this data set all day long. It is taking slightly longer than expected for us to update this one. And on the right-hand side is another one of our key data sets, which is the thickness of the quaternary deposits in the UK, or if you have the alternative version of it is the depth to rock head. So this data set has also been a long time in update, and we are hoping to get this one at the door next year as well. So we're going to use a new interpolation method. It's got a lot more AI running in the background of the new version. It's got 10 whole years of new borehole accessions, so it's got a lot of additional borehole data. And we will, of course, include an uncertainty model, which we failed to do with the previous version. So there's a lot of work going into it. It's taking a little bit of time, and I can only apologize for that. As usual, we will make a summary model, which will be completely free for everyone to play with, but you can help yourself to the full fat version anytime you like on Digimap. So these are definitely coming along probably later next year, but we have to get these out the doors because these are long overdue an update now. Right, a quick overview of use cases, and then it's almost to my last slide. So as you're aware, there are all kinds of issues with securing our power supplies in the UK. There's a huge push for offshore wind. So an awful lot of BGS activities in certainly the last 12 months has been focused on offshore wind site assessments, things to do with ground source heat and radioactive waste management and the potential for new nuclear. We're looking at the security of on and offshore connectors, so sharing power with France and other countries. So there's an awful lot of effort going into understanding coastal environments, marine environments, and the energy we can extract from the ground. We also have a lot of infrastructure work going on as well. The obvious one is High Speed 2, which is a project that falls in and out of love with the nation, but it is going ahead, and we're having to do an awful lot of work with High Speed 2 and their consultants in terms of ground engineering and environmental protection. And then for a long time, it's been hidden in the background and literally hidden out of sight. Buried infrastructure has really taken off in the UK. An awful lot of valuable assets are buried in the ground. A lot of power companies and water companies have realized that they need to manage their data more appropriately. The Geospatial Commission has been running a project called, I think it's called NUAR, which is looking at how underground information is managed, and our contribution to that is to provide asset management, asset failure analysis using geology information. Aquifer protection has also risen to the top of the pile for the hydro team at BGS. There's been a lot of high profile issues involving aquifers being contaminated, and there's been some fairly horrific news about surface waters being contaminated. So aquifer protection is ongoing, and brownfield reuse, once again, a bit like soils, it falls in and out of fashion. Brownfield reuse has come back to the top. There's an awful lot of local authorities who are looking at how we can do work with brownfield, assess how much it costs to recover these sites. And then the last data set that we've been working on, it launches tomorrow, which is why I'm very stressed today, is the radon potential data set for UK, which I don't think you have on your system, but I don't see why you couldn't have that. It's a really interesting data set in terms of how this geohazard behaves. So key thing to take away from this talk, and I'm going to wrap up, this is my last slide now. We're about to launch our new strategy. So we're about to redefine what BGS is doing for the next 5 years. And BGS Geology is undergoing a period of change, which is really pertinent if you're studying environmental science or geology at the moment. So we are analysing really what stakeholders want from BGS for the next 5 years. And a lot of the feedback we've had over the last 5 years is about, can we do more with the maps? Can we change the way we deliver them? Can we do more in terms of visualization? So that's coming, that's definitely coming along. We're completely rebuilding BGS Geology from the ground up. It is using a model and a platform which is over 30 years old, and it's creaking. It's taking us longer and longer to do basic things. So that's all going to go in the bin, and we're going to start over. For some people online, hopefully the next line is really good news. We are returning to what we used to do, which is national mapping, so strategic national mapping. So there'll be a lot more maps being put through the system. And in terms of people looking for a career, in terms of a geologist, we are looking to reboot our resurvey and reinterpretation. The LiDAR I mentioned earlier is not going away, and we're going to have to rework some of our maps to make it work with LiDAR. So if you're interested in a career in geology, then you need to look out for job adverts in the next 12 to 24 months. And I'll happily take questions.
I don't think we've got any questions at present. Oh, sorry, there is one actually. Will the offshore 50K scale maps be available on Digimap? James, I don't know if you can answer that. I know we have the 250K offshore right now.
Yes, it is. So we'll be when we get it.
Yeah, I think they're relatively new. I think the first ones only went live. I think the first ones went live in March. There was a silent launch of them. So there will be more coming along.
Thank you very much, Russell. Okay, there's a long question in the chat here. The accompanying user guide for the offshore seabed sediment 250K data lists 14 sediment types, whereas the folk classification on which it is based lists 15.
Yeah. Ouch. Yes. Okay. Somebody has obviously had a bad day with our data set. I must admit, the user guide for the offshore data sets, they were of their time. So I think they were mostly written around about 2013, 2014. My map manager for the offshore has a very, very long list of things that she wants to fix for the offshore maps. One of those things is the folk classification, and we're also going to deal with the issues with some of the classifications we've used in French territorial waters. So there's a lot of work to be done on those. The original user guides were written quite quickly for a purpose. They are long past their sell-by date. So I think my details are available to anyone here. If you've got specific issues with the offshore maps and how they are supported by documentation, feel free to write directly to me. It is my job to get that sorted, and I promise you we will be getting it sorted.
That's brilliant, Russell. Thank you. The person has said that for their research, it's really important to differentiate between sand and mud classifications.
Yes. Yeah.
Perhaps we can put you guys in touch.
Yeah, I'm well aware of that one. That one has haunted me for almost a decade. So yes.
Okay. And someone's asking about internships, but why don't I, you could send me any details, Russell, and I could circulate those.
Yeah, we do offer some internships. We don't tend to do it within my section. The science areas do offer internships. So it is worth getting in touch with us or looking out on the website quite regularly. We don't have like a regular cycle of internships. It's always good if you're interested in coming down to Nottingham or going across to Scotland or Wales. Definitely just write to BGS, just write to inquiries@BGS, and they will put you in touch with someone who can give you some feedback and suggest when we're next doing things.
Super, thank you. Okay, well, keep the questions coming, folks. I will share my screen and we'll have a look at Geology Digimap. If there's any more questions, I think either James could put those to Russell while I organise this. Okay, hopefully you guys can see the Digimap screen now.
Yep.
All right. Okay, so let's have a look at Geology Digimap. We've got 20 minutes left. I'm not proposing to take all that time, but let's have a look at a few things to give you an idea of what's available. So at the geology page, there's an about section here which gives you some information and links off to some of our help pages. There are also help pages accessed from the top right, where you can find full listings of all the data products we offer from BGS and some tips and hints on using Roam and download and so on. So we have three options here. Geology Room. So this is where you can browse the maps from the BGS. You can view, annotate those. You can decide which of the layers you wish to view, and you can print from here as well. So you can print from A5 up to A0 using Geology Room. We also have Geology Data download. So this is where you would download the actual raw data if you wish to use it in something like ArcGIS or QGIS to do some analysis or perhaps combine with your own data. As Russell mentioned, there are some data sets which are not available and they're not visualized in Geology Room, but you can download them from Geology Data download. So we'll have a quick look at both of these. And just to point out that we also offer a web map service. So I'll open that up to show you that we have two here. We have a web map service for the data which is covered by the educational license with the BGS. And we also have one for the open data, which is available to us via the BGS. Open data being data that is freely available to any member of the public to use under certain conditions, of course, but those conditions are not as restrictive as the educational data license. We do have a full copy of the license in the help pages, and you will have agreed to it when you registered for Digimap. So if anyone's got any questions on that stuff, do shout. If you're ever unsure of what you're permitted to do with the data, let us know and we can put you in touch with Russell or one of his team. But essentially what this web map service offers is you would copy and paste this link, and then you can paste it into your own application, and you can get a stream of the mapping images that we offer in Geology Digimap. if you don't need to actually analyze the data, this is a potentially efficient way for you to access it rather than downloading, storing, and perhaps processing data. So that is our web map service. So let's first look at Geology Room. And we'll have a little look at what we can do here. So if you've used any of our other Digimap collections, hopefully you're familiar with our Roam applications. They're very similar across the different collections. They just have some different features depending on what's appropriate for that collection. So when you open Roam, this is what you see, this map of British Isles and Ireland. And let's have a look at what we're actually viewing right now. So Russell mentioned the 12625K, and I've opened the base maps on the map window here to show you that this is what is available to view right now. So onshore, we're looking at the 12625, the sort of geology poster that may be familiar to a lot of you. And there are two options. You can either view by rock unit, which is as it's defined in the lexicon of named rock units from the BGS, or the rock type. I also want to show you, I'm going to zoom in a couple of times actually. Let's just look at this a bit more closely. So something else has bounced into the base maps now. We now have the hydrogeology available as well. So a base map is really an alternative map that's available to view at the same scale. So if I just select that, then I'm now viewing the hydrogeology of the UK. Let's go back to the rock unit, and I'm going to open up this map content on the left here. Hopefully you can see me hovering and selecting that. The map content area is where I have a degree of choice over what I actually want to display on my map. So at the moment, we're viewing the 12625K onshore geology and the offshore. And I can uncheck any of the boxes to remove something. So I've just unchecked the offshore one. I just want to concentrate on the onshore right now. But this is where you have some options on what you display on your map. Now I can look at the 12625 onshore in a bit more detail by selecting that down arrow. And this is where I can choose, any of these layers. I can turn them off to my choice. So I'm going to turn off everything except the bedrock. And then if I select that arrow next to bedrock, I get my legend. So I can see all of the different entries that we have here. So I'm looking at the rock unit base map. So these are the entries as per the lexicon from the BGS, but there's also the rock type base map here. So if I select that, that will change my map key to give me these rock types, such as this conglomerate sandstone here. So map content on the left here, this is where you can customize to a degree what's visible on the map. Your base maps are alternative maps that are available at the same scale. If I select hydrogeology now from the base maps, you'll see that my legend, my map content area, updates and now is giving me the map key for this hydrogeology map. So aquifers is one, and another aquifer category here as well. So hopefully that makes the base maps and the map content clear what those do. I'm now going to zoom in on the south coast and we'll find some more of the onshore geology to look at, for example, the 12250 and 125K, such as Russell was telling us about. So I've just zoomed in 2 or 3 times, and you should see that my base maps here, it's got a lot more populated. So in terms of the onshore stuff, what we have is the 12250K map here. I'm going to turn off my offshore again, just to make that a little bit less cluttered for you guys to see. So I can flip between, at this scale, any of these different base maps that are available, such as the 12250K, rock unit or type. There are soils maps here, indicators of flooding and permeability, and so on. I'm going to keep zooming in, and then what we'll see is that, let's zoom in, for example, near Lyme Regis, and now we can see that my 1 to 50k has appeared. So that's the onshore geology that I'm looking at right now. The 1 to 50k, that's the one with near national coverage that Russell showed you the map of. Apart from that, was it a sheet in Wales, I think. And if I keep zooming in, my base maps are going to eventually show the 1 to 10,000 coming in as well. So this is the most detailed mapping that we have. So I can just flip to that. So we're looking at the 1 to 10k rock unit base map right now. Russell did mention that there is incomplete coverage of this 1 to 10k mapping across the UK. And once we look at Geology Data download, I'll show you a way to identify the areas where there are maps available. So we've gone through our different base maps. There's a couple of little features just to show you. Let's just zoom in a little bit more. And up on this top toolbar here, there's a couple of things you could try out. There's a little information tool. So if you select that and then select any polygon on the map, a little feature information box comes up to tell you what you're looking at. So this tells me this blue polygon is a bedrock, and tells me the rock unit type and the era that's from. Would I say era or epoch? I'm sorry if I've got that wrong. Okay, so that's our feature information tool. Something else that's potentially useful is the 2UP. So this allows you to compare two maps at the same scale. So let's say, for example, I want to look at 1 to 10,000 rock unit on one map and compare it with the soil groups, for example, or indicators of flooding. So this is what the 2UP allows me to do, just to have two maps at the same scale and compare them on the same map window. So that is the 2UP. And there's a couple of other little features which are specific to Geology Room. Let's go somewhere different just to have a look at those. We have some geological images that you can see. These are from a database of images which was provided to us by the BGS. So how you would access these is with this little camera icon here. So once I select that camera icon from my sidebar on the left, I can see little icons to identify where there are images available. And then it's just a matter of, you can select one from this menu on the left. I'll have this aerial view of St. Abb's Head. And then a little thumbnail opens on the map, and you can click on that to see it in more detail. These images are not, there's not complete coverage. They're really in sort of, I guess, geologically significant areas of the UK is where you'll tend to find those. Now, in this area, you can see it's saying, okay, there's no geology at 1 to 10,000 or 1 to 25k. So that just gets back to what Russell was saying, that those are data sets with incomplete coverage, but exciting to hear that there's going to be more coming soon. And the final feature I want to show you, let's look at our 1 to 50k. Let's go for the rock type. And again, on the sidebar on the left here, the bottom little menu option is a little eye icon. And this is what we call the active legend. So this allows you to, let's open the bedrock. So it opens up the key on the left-hand side here, but this is a key that, reacts to what's actually visible on the map. So then I can go down and say, okay, this top one, andesite and basalt, if I click on that, it highlights the areas on the map where those are available. And it works in reverse as well. So if I choose, let's say this area here, this polygon, and select that on the map, it then highlights it in the legend for me. So that's telling me it's this bedrock and this peat superficial deposit. So those are all the features which are specific to Geology Room. We don't really have time to go through in detail the other ones, but let's just have a quick look to show you let's review what we've looked at. So we've looked at our map content. So that's where I can, control to an extent. If I want to take linear features off the map, I can do that. Mass movement for so on. The base maps, this is where I can select which map I want to view, see what's available at that scale. We also looked at the images, the active legend. We've identified some polygons using our information tool and used the 2UP tool to compare two maps at the same scale. We also offer drawing tools where you can add symbols, shapes, lines, measurements, and so on the map. And we do offer an overlays area. So we only have one pre-prepared overlay of geospatial information available for you to add, and that's hill shading. So I'm going to use this zoom to max extent button over on the scale bar here and turn that on, because that will be more meaningful at a smaller scale. Okay, so that's really just a 3D mapping to give you a better idea of the terrain. But we also in the overlay section have this WMS tab. So this is where you can bring in a web map service, either one of the Digimap ones to look at some of our mapping from other Digimap collections, or perhaps from another provider. So if I go down my list here, for example, I've got this Soils of Scotland map available there. I've got the Scottish Natural Heritage Renewables web map service. That might be an interesting one to turn on. We used this last week in an example where we're looking at wind farm proposals. So what this allows me to do is to view this data from this other provider in combination with the data from Geology Digimap that's visible in the map window. Now that's from Scotland, so let's go up. Yeah, so that has worked. So all these different polygons you see here, the blue, yellow, orange, and pink, those are wind farms in Scotland. And on this legend, which Scottish Natural Heritage have provided, it tells me if they're scoping or if they're at application stage, approved or installed, for example. So that is where you could add in a web map service and combine that with the data that we have available for you to browse. Other things to note, you can save the map that you're working on, and then it's accessible the next time you come into Geology Room. And if you want to print the map that you're working on, that's on the top toolbar. So you just select the print menu and there's various options. You can choose paper size, whether you want PDF or JPEG format and so on. So that's a quick tour of Geology Room. Before I finish, I'll quickly show you Geology Data Download. There's one little tool up here, I'm hovering over it. It's a little cloud button with an arrow. So I'm going to select that, and then this is going to open up Geology Data Download. And this orange box is the area that I was looking at in Geology Room. The Geology Data Download is a stepped process, and the first step is to select the area that you're interested in. So that's done this for me, it's brought in this area that I was looking at in Geology Room. So that's rather a large area, so I'm going to delete that. And up at the top left here, you'll see there's various ways in order to highlight the area that you're interested in. You can just draw a rectangle, you can draw a polygon, you can bring in your own coordinates and so on. There's lots of options. But let's just use the delete button to delete that. And let's go into a slightly smaller area. In fact, before I do that, I'm sorry, I'm jumping around. But before I do that, I want to show you that we have several categories of geology data products here. And if I open up each one, it tells me, okay, here are all the products that you can potentially download. But beside each one, you can switch on a little availability grid. So let's try the one to 50,000. Okay, so if I turn that on, everything that's shaded in purple, there is data covering that area, apart from this area in Wales that Russell mentioned. If we try the one to 25,000, you can see the pink areas are fewer. And similarly for the 1 to 10K, the pink areas are where you'll find data for that. But it sounds like we're going to be getting more data in the near future. Let's try the GeoCoast one. I think there's national coverage for this. So as you can see, there's national coverage for the new GeoCoast So if I turn off the availability grid, let's just go down to the southeast here and choose a small area. Okay, so I've chosen this small area around about Dover. And so the next step is for me to say, okay, here are the products that I want. I want the 1 to 10,000 for that. So you just check the box next to anyone that you're interested in. So for this example, I'll just take the 1 to 10K, 1 to 50K and GeoCoast. If I was interested in the offshore geology, I would open that section and, okay, I'll take the 1 to 250K bedrock, for example. So it's really just a matter of going through each section, checking the boxes next to whatever you want, and then you add to basket. And this is a basket where you'll have some options. So if you see an arrow, there's an option. So for the 1 to 50K, I can choose which version I want. Do I want the 2016, or perhaps I want the 2011, for example. And for this one, I've got a choice of format, either shape, MIF, MID, or tab. I will go for shape. It depends on what system you're using. What's your preference there? So now it's just a matter of saying request download, and then I will be sent a confirmation and then a link to download the data when it's ready. So that is all I wanted to show you on my little whistle-stop tour, and I'll just leave this screen open in case there's something that people want to see again. And James, can I ask you if there's any additional questions for Russell?
There's no additional questions. I think I've addressed the ones that were raised, but we still have a few minutes. So if people have any general questions, either to Russell or to us at Digimap, we're happy to try and answer them.
Thanks, James. If people don't have any questions, then feel free to just leave the meeting. I will follow up next week with a recording of the session and Russell's slides if he is willing to share those. Yep,
no problem with that. You can share those away. There was a question earlier on about quaternary thickness. I have a live news feed on that one. The quaternary thickness, we actually have 2 quaternary thickness models. And I think it's one of the Marine Conservancy agencies has asked us to update both into one, which we intend to do soon, and that will hopefully be made available. There's quite a lot going on in the marine environment because it's all been driven by information to do with onshore connectors or offshore wind farms. So there was another question about detailed information around Suffolk. I'm just trying to find out exactly where we are working. I know we are doing work around Norfolk. So the next map to go live at what we call high resolution or fine scale, roughly 1 to 10,000 scale, is Yorkshire. So Doris, or the map around Lyme Regis, has been around for about a decade now. Bristol Channel's been around 12 months. Anglesy's been around for about 3 months. Yorkshire's next. I will try and find out where's next in the east of England. I don't know exactly what we've got in the Suffolk area, but I can try and find out, basically. These are all done in response to active wind farm proposals, so it's a little bit haphazard. There's no real strategy. It's who comes next to the table to ask questions, basically.